How many of you remember the movie Ferris Bueller's Day Off?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 1986 classic, if we can call a movie from that time a classic, is about a kid who just wants to get away for the day. He just wants to take a day off. He just wants to relax. And he wants to bring along his best friend, Cameron. Ferris's best friend, Cameron, is incapable of relaxing. And as the movie unfolds, we begin to get an understanding for why that is. It's because of his home life. And in an otherwise very comic, silly movie, you have a very serious undertone about Cameron dealing with the fact that his parents don't really like each other and don't really seem to be giving him the affection and attention he would like. The symbol of this misdirected affection in the movie is a 1958 Ferrari. And this Ferrari, in fact, this is the vehicle of choice for Ferris. He wants to take Cameron's dad's Ferrari and use this as their joyride for the day. And the first time we meet the Ferrari, Cameron and Ferris, they open up the garage door, and Cameron tells Ferris, "You don't understand. My father spent 3 years restoring this car. It is his love. It is his passion." And Ferris quickly interrupts, "It is his fault that he did not lock the garage." and as the movie progresses, you begin to, this reality dawns on Cameron of why he is the way he is, why he's a little psychosomatic, why he is struggling with, the issues in his life. And toward the end of the movie, there's a very intense scene where he is kicking the car, and he is denting the hood and kicking in the lights, and he is saying to his dad, who is not present, he is saying, "Who do you love? You love a car." And in an otherwise very comic, silly movie, it's a very serious issue that he's dealing with. Now, the reason I bring that up, the fact that he is jaded by this lack of affection, by misdirected affection, is because that movie seemed to really have a legacy. It was very popular. In fact, I have it on good authority that there's going to be a little wink to Ferris Bueller's Day Off tonight in one of the Super Bowl commercials. I don't know if you've heard about this, but so keep an eye out for that. But here, 25 years later, that they would still be referencing this movie. But I think the movie really impacted a generation of people, of affluent young people in the middle of the 80s who had parents who were either like Ferris Bueller's parents, kind of clueless, or like Cameron's parents, who were so focused on things, their work, their job, their activities, a car, and did not give their children the attention that they should have. The whole movie is kind of about misplaced, misdirected affections, and what are both the comic and the tragic fallout from that. So this is what I want to talk to you about this morning. 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17, is about the problem that we have even as believers of not directing our affections properly. These are just tremendous verses. We're going to probably just spend the rest of this hour dealing with verse 15. We'll get into verses 16 and 17 next hour. But I really want to just kind of mull through these verses a little bit and get what they're saying. Human affections, even for us as believers, and we know that our affections should most properly be on God. Yet even for us, human affections are a little, are easily affected, are easily swayed, and are easily misdirected. And in, we sing a lot of songs that are about, all I want to do is praise you and worship you all day long. I really like, and I'm sure I've quoted this before, but the hymnist who is honest enough to say, "Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love." And I think John, if anything, he is honest about sin and honest about the continuing pool of sin and the continuing propensity we have as sinners to draw, as sinners, as redeemed individuals, to be drawn away from God, to take our affections off of God, who really alone primarily deserves our affections. Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. So the Apostle John spent some time talking about the believer's love. And I think he's dealing with this issue of the potential for misdirected affections. This is hauntingly appropriate for us today as believers. Our affections are just drawn in so many different ways. I think what he wants to say in 1 John 2, 15 through 17 is just this. This is how I've summarized it. Direct your affections fully from the world to the Father. Direct your affections fully from the world to the Father. And the first reason for that is because our love for the world tends to exclude our affections for the Father. Love for the world tends to exclude our affections for the Father, and that's what we're going to deal with, as we're going to talk about here in verse 15. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Okay? So this is where we're at. Love for the world excludes affections for the Father. Now, what I think the apostle is doing here, and we'll touch on some of the Greek words here. What I think he's trying to do is he's trying to undermine the presupposition that we can like the world and we can like God. We can love the world and we can love God. And John, in his very black and white sense, is going to make a sharp distinction. You can't love the world, you can't love God, you can't have one foot over here and another foot over here. So he uses this command, do not love the world, and it is this right here, this is not, agapate, do not love the world. This is the word kosmon. It's a word that is used very, very frequently, and we'll get to that in just a minute. I want to look at this, the tense or the form of this word, me agapate. This is a subjunctive. It is an imperative of prohibition. Now in Greek you have two ways of saying don't do something. There is a subjunctive of prohibition and there is an imperative of prohibition. The subjunctive of prohibition says, it is talking about don't start doing something. Okay, you're not doing it now. You're tempted to start doing it. Don't start doing it. What he uses here is the imperative of prohibition. And usually that means you are doing something and now you need to stop doing something. Okay, now why does that matter? It matters because what he's really saying, what he's getting at is stop loving the world. He's not saying you're going to be tempted to start loving the world, so therefore don't start loving the world. He's saying you are in love with the world. Stop loving the world and set your affections on loving God instead. That's the power of that imperative of prohibition. You have been engaged in this. You have been doing this. You have a track record of this. You need to stop doing that and start loving God instead. John's audience is engaged with the love of the world, and I don't know exactly what that meant for them in that culture. I know what it means for us, and we'll talk about that this morning. And even this morning, I'm trying to mull over what exactly that looks like. But he perceived that his Christian audience, these are believers, these aren't unbelievers, his Christian audience was engaged in a love affair with the world. And he wanted to break them of that and get their affections on the Father instead. So what is the world? The Apostle John uses this term for world, like we have in your notes here. He uses this term 105 times in his writings. It is used a total of 186 times in the New Testament. So we're talking this word right here, cosmos, which is going to use again down here. So it's used 105 times by John, 186 times total in the New Testament. More than half of the usages of this word for world are by John in the Gospel or the three epistles or Revelation. So when he uses the word world, what is he saying? What does he mean? By the way, he's saying it right now. Well, he uses it in three different ways, and I've tried to enumerate these for you here on your worksheet A, B, and C. In some ways, he uses it just in a very neutral sense, just for the created material order. For instance, in John 17:5, Jesus prays, Father, glorify me in your presence with the glory I had with you before the world began. He's just talking about the creation of the material order. Not a negative or a positive. It's just a neutral creation of the material order. And he's saying, I had a relationship with you, Father, before then, and it glorified me like you did before creation, is basically what he's saying. It's neutral. It's not good, it's not bad, it's just stuff, the stuff around us. There's a positive way that he seems to use the world in terms of redeemable humanity. He will, for instance, in John 3:16, for God so loved the world. Now, what does that mean that he loved the world? It means, in context, it seems to be referring to redeemable humanity. Those individuals that God wants to redeem, it is used in a good way. These are the people who have potential to receive the love, the redemption of God. Redeemable humanity. John 1:29, this is John saying, here is the Lamb who saves the world. Well, is the world a bad thing? Why would Jesus be saving a bad thing? No, he's referring there specifically to redeemable humanity. And then C, there's another word that is often used frequently in John. The world is seen as an active force that is opposed to God and fights against God. I missed a word there, sorry about that. That fights against God. John 15:18 is a good example of this. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. So three different ways in which John uses it. John uses the word cosmos neutrally, just everything that's created. Uses it positively of God's target for salvation and redemption, namely redeemable humanity. But then in some cases it is also seen as in a negative sense. As a force that is opposed to God and what God is doing. Now aside from just neutral, positive, and negative, there's various levels of action. The created order was just created passively. God just created it and let it run. Redeemable humanity, passive. We, as we've explored here in 1 John, we can't do anything to save ourselves. God needed to save us. Whereas this third instance of the world, the cosmos, being an active force that is opposed to God and fights against God, this is not seen as passive. This is seen as active. Again, back to John 15:18. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. So the world in this third instance isn't just something that kind of floats around and reacts to Christians. The world has an active antipathy, animosity for God, God's people, God's chosen Savior, those who would follow him. And I believe it is this third instance that is being used here when he says, do not love the world or the things of this world. I don't think he's saying don't love the created order, though, I don't think we want to say we love the world, the trees and the rocks and everything else, but I don't think that's the point. I think that the idea here is not to align with things that go directly contrary to the will of God. And I think that's what he's referring to here. One famous scholar, I like how he put this, I. Howard Marshall, said this: when John speaks of the world here, he is thinking of the source of opposition to God. He's not thinking about the material universe or its contents as such. And that's a key, and we'll get back to that in just a few minutes. Nor is he thinking of the people in this world as people, or redeemable people. There's no suggestion that the Christian is to hate the material order or its inhabitants, or that he should refrain from contact with them. So if we misinterpret this to be, the world is non-believers, then we say we don't want to have any contact with non-believers. I think we're missing the point of this passage. I think we're missing the reason, what John is trying to say when he refers to the world. He's not talking about unredeemed humanity or yet to be redeemed humanity. We are not supposed to withdraw from the people, unbelievers around us. I think that's missing the point. He's talking about an anti-God, active world system that opposes God and God's people. Now notice here, also in verse 15, he doesn't say, he says, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. So John keeps going back to these paternal terminology, the family links. that we have with God. God is Father.